We're going to go and speak right now on line 4 with Paul Lane, the busiest and most vocal member of the House of Assembly. I'm looking forward to this call. How you doing, sir?
Jonathan, I'm doing great this morning. How about yourself?
I'm all right. What's on your mind today, sir?
Well, Jonathan, I had two subjects, actually, but my comments are going to be quick on both. And if you have any questions or anything to add, certainly you can, because this is a conversation, not a monologue.
Thank you.
Jonathan, absolutely, that's what it's all about. Jonathan, first thing, I just wanted to make a quick comment about the school busing situation. And I know, I've gotten some calls and emails from parents who, were upset about the situation with all these buses being taken off the road. But I just want to say, in fairness, I understand the frustration. I absolutely do. And I believe that there are more things that can be done that I've certainly advocated for busing. And had they been done, perhaps some of this stuff could have been avoided. But with that said, there was some changes made to the regulations in the last sitting of the House of Assembly as it relates to increasing bus inspections and so on by the Department of Service NL, and some stricter rules on contractors and things like that.
And the Public Tendering Act was changed?
Well, I'll get to that one. That's not quite right. But it was, but it wasn't. I'll get that. But anyway, the point is that there was some changes made there, and I think that's a positive thing. And the fact that Service NL have picked up on these deficiencies and are holding the contractor accountable and making sure that there's no unsafe buses on the road in this circumstance, I think that that's a good thing. And I know there's an inconvenience and so on, but I certainly don't want to see, I'm sure none of us want to see children on unsafe buses. And if that's what it takes, some inconvenience for a couple of days to make sure that children are safe, then I think we kind of have to suck that one up a bit, as inconvenient as it might be.
That's what I said to the Minister of Service and Newfoundland and Labrador yesterday, Eddie Joyce and I. We've listen, what you say is absolutely true, and I vociferously agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, with that said, I think that there are other issues at play that I have raised on numerous occasions, issues around the tendering, the length of contracts and staggered tenders and so on. Hopefully, some of these things do get addressed at some point in the future through the Procurement Act. There was a new Procurement Act passed. However, certainly is not enacted, and there's absolutely zero regulations written or policies in place, and that was left to the sole discretion of the Cabinet, which was one of the problems I had with the legislation to begin with.
Can I stop you there for a second?
Yep, sure.
Is it not critical? Listen, the contracts have already been awarded. The tenders are awarded.
Correct.
Therefore, in order for it to be enacted, it would only take priority, I would think, in order to make sure that the act is enacted before the next round of tendering goes out. Does that not make sense?
Correct. Yes, it does. That's what I'm saying. So, and that's what I mean. So, the point, I guess, the point I'm making is that it's not fixed today, okay? But hopefully, when new contracts get awarded in the future, and if the new Tendering Act is in place by then, and they start looking at things like perhaps lengthening contracts, so that contractors can actually go out and purchase new buses as opposed to being forced into having old buses, because, what bank is going to lend somebody all that money for brand new buses if you got a contract that's only a year or two long?
So you're saying if you have a longer contract, you can afford to get newer buses. Is that your logic?
That would certainly be one of the points for sure, and these are points that have been raised by the busing industry. So these are things that I think that need to be looked at. I would also like to see the government inspections take place during the summer before the school opens, so that as opposed to waiting for the school year to be, partially over before some of the government inspections take place. I think they should take place so that all the buses are inspected before school starts.
What about what about if you inspect the brake pads of a bus 5 months before the school season goes, and you write it, you give it a checklist, okay, and then should you not have the brakes, for example, inspected just before the school season starts? I mean, I understand it would be really smart to do it during the summer. It makes perfect sense, but some things have to be inspected right before the buses go out on the roads.
Well, I agree, but the problem we have is that a lot of the stuff is not getting inspected by the government, per se, until maybe 2 or 3 months after the school is open. So I'm just saying that timing, it should be done as close to school opening time as possible, so that we're not 2 or 3 months into it before the buses get inspected. So, I mean, I guess the point I'm making, Jonathan, which, you know, is that there are a number of issues. Simply putting in stricter fines and so on for contractors who don't follow the rules and holding them accountable is not necessarily enough. It's a good thing. We're seeing some results from it, which I'm glad to see, but there are other things that we could do, and we can't just simply say the issue is now taken care of, let's forget about it. I think there are other things that can be done. That's my only point.
Clearly, and up to this point, seemingly, it seems that we've forgotten about the bus inspections, and this is why we're now seeing a glut of them all across the province. It's fascinating to watch.
Correct. And this didn't happen overnight. No. And I'm sure that these issues happened when the previous government was in place as well. It just came to a head at this particular time, I think, when we had that accident and the bus went off the road. And that's really what started this whole whole chain of events and people being more aware and so on. Yep. But the point is, we are making some progress. I'm glad to see that, but I think there's more we can do, and we need to keep working on the other issues. The other point I want...
We've got 2 minutes left, Paul, so you go right ahead and let's talk about snow clearing. Go.
Yeah, okay. So, I think I've been pretty clear on my concerns around the snow clearing, around the lack of availability of equipment on the roads, and of the impact of the removing the nighttime shift that was in place in the high traffic areas. I just want to say, because I've been talking to I've talked to operators and so on, and you know, people working at that, and I know, and this happened, by the way, when I was a member of City Council. Sometimes this would happen as well, you know, with our plow operators, even in the city. You know, these are frontline people, and of course, if you're frontline, you're the one who's facing the public all the time. And I just want to say to people, as frustrated as they may be around the snow clearing on the highways so far this year, and the concerns, and I'm frustrated as well about it, it's not the operator's fault. And so, you know, I think we need to bear that in mind. And when I hear sometimes stories about people who, you know, are not very nice, we'll put it that way, and maybe that's putting it mildly, to the operators, is not the operator's fault if there's not enough equipment on the road. It's not the operator's fault if he or she didn't get called in to clear the snow in time and so on.
Thank you.
These are all management decisions. Mm-hmm. And they're not the operator's decision. So the operators go out, they work hard in the worst kind of conditions, they do the best they can, they do a great job from what I've seen when they're out. But if they don't have the proper equipment to do the job, or enough equipment, or enough operators and so on, they can only do the best they can with what they're given. And I just ask people to bear that in mind. You know, if you should run across an operator and decide that you want to vent your frustration on that individual, that's really not where the frustration should be vented.
Thank you very much, and excellent points to make. Be kind to your neighbor and your snowplow operator. Paul Lane, good luck in Mount Pearl over the next couple of winter moments, and I'll see you at the Frosty Fest, no doubt, in February.
Absolutely will, and I'll also be seeing you hopefully this year at the Celebrity Karaoke in April, which I will be touching base with at a later date.
All right.
And you can bring the roller girls again.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. You take care. Bye-bye.
All the best.